Mr. President, I wanted to say a word about an issue that I think has not gotten the kind of attention that it deserves here in Washington or even among the general public, and that is the situation regarding our Postal Service. Right now, for a number of reasons, the Postal Service is facing financial difficulties. Number one, it is no secret to any American that first-class mail is declined significantly because the American people are using email and not first-class mail, and that decline in first-class mail has significantly impacted the revenue for the Post Office. Second of all, not widely known, is the fact that the Postal Service every single year now, because of legislation passed in 2006, is forced to come up with $5.5 billion every single year for future health retiree benefits. To the best of my knowledge and to the best of the knowledge of anybody who I have talked to, there is no agency of government forced to come up with anything near this kind of onerous requirement, nor is any corporation in the private sector doing that as well. So the issue that we face, Mr. President, is whether or not we are going to save the United States Postal Service, whether or not we are going to bring about reforms which make the Postal Service strong and relevant to the 21st century and the digital age, or whether we do as the Postmaster General has proposed, cut 40% of the workforce, shut down 3,700 post offices, most of them rural, end Saturday mail service, and lay off or cut back on the workforce of the Postal Service by 40%, over 200,000 American workers. Many of them, by the way, veterans who are now serving and working in the Post Office. So let me just start off again with what the Postmaster General has proposed. Let me talk a little bit about legislation which has been led by Senator Lieberman and Senator Carper, which I think will be coming to the floor, I expect, next week, and then talk about where I think and a number of us think we should be going to strengthen that bill. Number one, this is what the Postmaster General has suggested that he needs to do in order to solve the financial problems facing the Post Office. One, close down about 3,700 mostly rural post offices. And I would tell you, Mr. President, coming from a rural state, that a post office is not just a post office. In many parts of Vermont, many parts of America, rural post offices serve many, many functions. And if you get rid of those post offices, you are really causing severe distress to the identity, the sense of self of small towns in rural America. Number two, what the Postmaster General has suggested is the shutting down of about 252 mail processing facilities, about half of the mail processing facilities in this country. If you do that, there is no debate that you are significantly slowing down the delivery of mail in America. If you used to put a letter in a postal box, it might get there in 1 day. Now the talk is it may get there in 3 days. If today it gets there in 3 days, it might in the future, under these cuts, get there in 5 days. And here is the fear that I have and many other members of the Senate and House have. If the Post Office is trying to compete against the instantaneous communications of email, what does it mean that you are slowing down significantly mail service? And many of us believe that this is really the beginning of a death spiral for the Post Office, in the sense that many consumers, many businesses will say, hey, what's the sense of me working with the Post Office if my mail or packages are going to get there in 3 days or 5 days? So we think that shutting down 252 mail processing facilities, slowing down mail services, is really laying the foundation for the destruction of the post office as we know it. To my mind, the issue is not whether we make change or maintain the status quo. The status quo is not working. The post office has to change. In my view, and I think the view of many others, the post office must become much more aggressive, much more entrepreneurial, must be going out to the business community, must be going out to the consumers and saying, we have these services we can offer you. I'll give you just a few examples, and some of them, by the way, are included in the legislation brought forth by Senators Lieberman and Carper and Collins and Scott Brown. For example, in a rural state, if people would like to walk into a post office and get a letter notarized, they can't do it today. If people walk into a post office and want to get 10 copies of their letter, can't do it today. The United States Congress has said you can't do that. If somebody walks into a rural post office, wants to get a fishing license or a hunting license or fill out a driver's license, can't do that right now. So I think what we need is a new business model for the post office, much more entrepreneurial. I would suggest, and what's happening around the world is clearly the United States Postal Service is not the only postal service having to deal with the digital world. What we're seeing in Europe and throughout the world is countries responding by giving their postal services much more flexibility. One example, got a lot of people who are unemployed. A lot of people get unemployment checks. Sometimes in order to cash those checks, they have to go to a payday lender. Why can't they walk into a postal service and cash that check at a minimum fee rather than paying 10, 15, or 20% to a payday lender? So one of the provisions that I think has got to be included in any serious postal reform legislation is a blue ribbon commission made up of the best entrepreneurs we can find, those people within the Postal Service who have the most experience, who will tell us what can we do and how can we raise additional revenue when you got thousands of post offices all over this country? Can they be renting out their space? What other services can they be providing? Right now, we have our letter carriers delivering mail to about 150 million doors every single day, 6 days a week, all over the country. What more can they be doing? So the debate that we're having is two visions of the future of the post office. Number one, the Postmaster General is saying, let's cut 40% of the workforce over a period of time. Let's slow down mail delivery service. And that's the business model that he is proposing. Some of us are saying that when you have a rural constituency, when you have senior citizens who live at the end of a dirt road, who are dependent upon the post office in order to get their prescription drugs in the mail, when you have rural areas that very much depend on rural post offices, that the goal is to give more flexibility to the post office so they can be more competitive, so they can raise additional sums of funding in order to deal with their financial problems. A couple of specific points. Almost everybody agrees now that the $5.5 billion being required from the post office is absolutely onerous. I have talked to the Office of Personnel Management. They think $2.5 or $3 billion is quite enough, given the fact that we have $45 billion already in the account. You talk to other people, and they will say, given the fact that that $45 billion is already earning interest, that in fact you don't have to do anything. You don't have to add anything more into that account, and it will deal with all of the future health care retiree benefits that the post office requires. So what I believe that we have got to be very firm and say, number one, if the post office is going to survive in any significant way, we have got to maintain 1 to 3 day delivery standards for first-class mail. Second of all, we have got to maintain 6-day delivery of mail, not end Saturday service. Third, we have got to protect our rural post offices. Fourthly, we have got to significantly reduce pre-funding requirements for future retiree health benefits, not to mention that there is also widespread agreement that the Postal Service has overpaid the FERS account, the Federal Employment Retirement Service, by some $11 billion. And obviously, that has got to be dealt with. Lastly, in my view, as I said previously, we need to develop a new business model for the Postal Service, get them involved in the digital age, not run away from it, get them involved, expand what they can do both with state and local government as well as what they can do with the private sector. So, Mr. President, in the coming days, this is an issue that a number of us will be working on, and I would look forward to the support of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle.